Let me tell you something that might feel a bit uncomfortable at first. The reason people keep disrespecting you is not because they are brave or dominant. It is because, often without realizing it, you have trained them to believe it is acceptable to treat you that way. In the next few minutes, I'm going to break down 5 quiet but powerful forms of disrespect that slowly damage your authority, your confidence, and your influence. Once you start seeing them clearly, you won't be able to ignore them anymore. If this already makes you think about certain people in your life, don't rush past it. Sit with it for a moment and observe, because what follows is not just about recognizing disrespect, but learning how to stop it without unnecessary conflict, emotional drama, or guilt. The first form of disrespect you should never overlook is when you are consistently ignored or treated like a low priority. This one is tricky because it doesn't look offensive on the surface. There is no shouting, no open insults, no direct confrontation. Instead, it shows up in quiet patterns, late replies, vague excuses, last-minute cancellations, or situations where your time and presence are treated as something flexible and replaceable. At first, it might feel like nothing serious, but over time it slowly changes your position in someone's mind. Psychologically, this is not usually about someone being busy or forgetful. People naturally give priority to what they value. So, when someone repeatedly delays you, only responds when it suits them, or interacts strictly on their terms, it reflects an unspoken ranking. You are not high on their list. And here is the part most people don't want to accept. If you allow that behavior to continue without any change in your response, you are silently confirming it. Every time you stay overly available, patiently wait without question, or constantly adjust your own life for them, you are teaching them that your access is guaranteed regardless of effort. Respect rarely collapses in one moment. It fades slowly through repeated patterns. People don't usually decide to disrespect you consciously. They simply continue behavior that has no consequence attached to it. This is why it becomes common among people who are kind, understanding, or naturally accommodating. They are less likely to push back. The real issue is not a missed call or delayed reply. It is the pattern behind it, because patterns become rules in relationships. And once the unspoken rule becomes, I can show up however I want and still get access to you, your leverage disappears. And without leverage, respect weakens. Many people try to fix this through explanation. They send long messages, express how they feel, ask for clarity, or try to make the other person understand their perspective. It feels mature, but in reality, it often signals emotional dependence. It shows that their attention matters more to you than your own boundaries. The more effective response is not emotional reaction, but behavioral correction. You simply adjust your level of availability. You stop rearranging your life for people who consistently treat your time casually. You respond with the same energy you receive. Not as punishment, but as alignment. Because people don't adjust based on what you say. They adjust based on what they experience. When someone realizes that ignoring you leads to reduced access, delayed responses, or missed opportunities, their behavior naturally begins to shift. And if it doesn't shift at all, then you gain clarity about where you actually stand. At that point, it is no longer confusion. It is choice, and you either accept a lowered position in that dynamic or step away entirely. Real power is not about controlling others. It is about having options and choosing where your presence is valued. The second form of disrespect you should never tolerate is public contradiction used to undermine you. This is less about logic and more about social positioning. Healthy disagreement can exist privately and respectfully, but public contradiction is different. It happens in front of others, often in a sharp or unnecessary way, usually over small details that don't truly matter. The intention is not truth. The intention is positioning. It is about lowering your perceived authority in a group setting. When someone corrects you publicly or challenges you in a way that creates embarrassment, they are often trying to shift how others see both of you. And if this pattern continues without response, it slowly affects how people treat you. Because in social environments, perception often becomes reality. You don't need to respond with anger or aggression. In fact, emotional reactions usually make the situation worse. Instead, the strongest response is calm awareness. You acknowledge what was said without over-explaining or defending yourself excessively. Then you maintain your composure and let consistency speak for you over time. Because people eventually notice patterns. They notice who tries to elevate others and who tries to diminish them in public. And they adjust their respect accordingly. At its core, respect is not demanded through words. It is maintained through consistent behavior, strong boundaries, and calm self-assurance. The moment you stop overgiving your attention and start protecting your energy, the dynamic around you begins to change. When someone cuts you off while you're speaking, challenges you in front of others, or casually dismisses what you say in a group, they're usually not trying to improve the conversation. What they're really doing is checking if they can lower your status in that moment without any pushback. Social dynamics shift constantly, and these small interactions act like signals that everyone around is quietly reading. If you let someone override you publicly and say nothing, people don't see that as quiet strength or maturity. They read it as you losing ground. Status isn't about how confident you feel inside. It's about what others consistently see and interpret. That's why this kind of behavior spreads so fast if you ignore it. One person does it, nothing happens, and suddenly others feel like they can do the same. A lot of people make the mistake of becoming passive in these situations. They convince themselves they're being wise, that it's not worth responding, or that real confidence doesn't need to prove anything. It sounds reasonable, but it doesn't match how people actually read social behavior. Staying silent in that moment doesn't come across as neutral. It often looks like agreement or submission. On the other side, some people react too strongly. They snap back, raise their voice, or become defensive. That also works against them because it makes them look emotionally unstable or easy to trigger. The most effective response sits right in the middle. It's calm, short, and clear. You don't turn it into an argument or give long explanations. You simply take back control of the moment with a brief correction, a smooth redirect, or a statement that closes the situation without opening a debate. When you handle it this way, you show confidence, control, and clear boundaries at the same time. The goal isn't to win or prove someone wrong. It's to make it clear that being undermined in public won't go unnoticed. Once people see that boundary, most of them stop testing it. And if someone keeps pushing, it becomes obvious to everyone else what they're doing. At that point, their behavior reflects poorly on them, not on you. This is why strong, effective leaders deal with these moments immediately but without creating unnecessary tension. They understand that authority is built and protected in small, quick moments, not long speeches. In group settings, everything gets amplified. One small challenge that goes unanswered can slowly redefine how people see your role. The intention isn't to dominate the room, it's to make your boundaries clear. When people understand those limits, things become smoother. When they don't, they keep pushing to find them. Public contradiction isn't really about truth or logic. It's about who controls the narrative in that moment. The third type of disrespect you should never ignore is when someone hides insults behind humor. This one is especially tricky because it comes wrapped in something socially acceptable. It sounds like a joke, but it doesn't feel like one. These are the comments that get a laugh but leave a slight sting, the kind that carry judgment, subtle criticism, or a tone of superiority. You'll often hear it followed by something like, "I'm just kidding," which gives the person an easy way to avoid responsibility. That's what makes it effective. It allows them to test boundaries without fully committing to the insult. The risk here works on two levels. First, it quietly chips away at how others perceive you without triggering a clear moment of confrontation. Second, it measures how much you're willing to tolerate. Every time you let it pass without any response, you're sending a signal that this kind of behavior is acceptable. People are extremely sensitive to social cues, and even small remarks repeated over time can shape how others see you. What looks like harmless teasing in the moment can slowly turn into a pattern that lowers your position without you even noticing it happening. Over time, these small moments start to add up. They begin to affect how you see yourself, how confident you feel, and how others perceive you. When you keep brushing off these remarks or laughing along just to avoid tension, you unintentionally show people that your self-respect can be bent and your boundaries are open for negotiation. And once that pattern forms, your value in that space slowly starts to decline. The moment you become aware of this, your response needs to shift. Not aggressively, not emotionally, but deliberately. You don't need to attack or create conflict because that only makes you look reactive. Instead, you respond with calm control. Sometimes it's as simple as changing your tone, pausing for a second, or saying something direct like, "That didn't land well with me." Small responses like this can instantly reset the dynamic. What really matters is consistency. One response might not change much, but when you respond the same way every time, people start adjusting. You're not being overly sensitive. You're clearly communicating what is acceptable and what isn't. There's another layer to these disguised insults. They're not just about the comment itself, they're also a test in front of others. If you allow it to pass in a group setting, people unconsciously lower how they rank you because they see that your value wasn't defended. But when you address it calmly without making a scene, it sends a completely different message. It shows strength, awareness, and self-respect. Over time, this creates a reputation. People begin to understand that you're not easy to belittle, not someone who can be casually dismissed, and not a person whose limits can be ignored without consequences. And that reputation does something powerful. It prevents future disrespect before it even starts. Others begin to respect your boundaries automatically because they've seen that you enforce them. The core idea here is simple but often overlooked. Respect isn't built through words alone. It's built and maintained through consistent behavior. Humor can shape how people see you, but it can also be neutralized when you calmly stand your ground. Once that line is clear, those hidden insults lose their impact. And the person making them will either adjust or expose their true intentions, which gives you clarity about where you stand with them. The fourth type of disrespect you should never allow is boundary erosion. This one is especially dangerous because it doesn't always look negative. In fact, it can appear friendly, persistent, or even caring on the surface. But underneath, it's about repeatedly crossing lines you've already made clear. It often starts small. Someone asks for just one more favor, shows up without notice, or pushes you to share things you're not comfortable sharing. At first, it feels minor, easy to overlook. But slowly it builds. Each small step makes the next one easier, and before you realize it, your original boundaries have been stretched far beyond what you intended. The key issue here isn't the action itself, but the pattern of ignoring your limits after they've already been communicated. When someone keeps pushing after you've said no, they're not misunderstanding you. They're testing how firm your boundaries really are. At first, each small compromise might seem harmless. It feels like no big deal in the moment. But when these moments stack up over time, they quietly reshape what you start to accept as normal. What once felt like a clear boundary slowly becomes flexible without you even noticing. This happens because people naturally test limits. They begin gently, watching how you respond. If there's no resistance, they take another step next time, and then another. Gradually, they learn that your boundaries aren't firm and that they can stretch them without consequence. The most subtle version of this is when it's wrapped in something that sounds positive: concern, support, or negotiation. You'll hear things like, "I just need a bit more time," or "I'm only asking because I care," or "It's a small thing, can you just make an exception?" On the surface, these sound reasonable, even harmless. But each time you give in, you weaken the structure of your own self-respect. The real issue isn't just the request, it's what that exception teaches, both to you and to the other person. It sends the message that your time, your energy, and your principles can be adjusted if enough pressure is applied. And the person pushing doesn't always see it as disrespect. From their perspective, they simply learn that persistence works. So they keep using it. Respect doesn't grow through constant compromise. It grows through clarity and consistency. If your boundaries keep shifting, people stop taking them seriously. The right way to handle this isn't through long explanations or emotional discussions. It's through behavior. You don't need to defend your decision, over-explain it, or apologize for it. You simply reinforce your boundary in a calm, firm way, right when it's being tested. For example, if someone keeps interrupting your personal time, you might say, "That doesn't work for me right now. We can talk about it later." And then you stick to that. No extra justification, no back and forth. Just follow through. If they try again, your response stays the same. That repetition is what teaches them that your limits are real, not temporary, not flexible, and not open for negotiation. What makes this approach powerful is that it shows control without creating unnecessary tension. You're not escalating the situation, but you're also not leaving any room for confusion. Your position is clear. If you allow this kind of boundary erosion to continue, it creates a long-term pattern where your needs, your priorities, and your self-respect slowly get pushed aside in favor of someone else's agenda. And once that pattern is established, it becomes much harder to break. It may seem small in the beginning, but over time it becomes deeply damaging. That's why recognizing it early matters. When you respond with calm certainty and refuse to negotiate your limits, you take back control. You protect your time, your energy, and your sense of self. In the end, consistently holding your boundaries is one of the strongest ways to prevent manipulation, maintain control over your life, and ensure that people treat you with the level of respect you expect. The fifth type of disrespect you should never accept is The fifth kind of disrespect you should never accept is selective respect. This one is especially confusing because it often looks like kindness or good behavior on the surface. It happens when someone treats you well, listens to you, and shows respect only when it suits their needs, but becomes dismissive, impatient, or even slightly condescending when things don't go their way. Unlike obvious disrespect or clear boundary violations, this pattern is harder to spot. It works slowly. One moment they're attentive and warm, and the next they're distant or cold. That inconsistency starts to affect how you see yourself. You begin questioning your own value because the way you're treated keeps changing. This unpredictability pulls your attention in. You start analyzing their behavior, trying to understand what changed, wondering what you did differently. Over time, it drains your mental energy because you're constantly trying to make sense of something that doesn't follow a stable pattern. What makes this even more damaging is how it affects your sense of trust. It doesn't just confuse the relationship, it confuses your perception of it. You experience moments that feel genuine and positive, which make you believe the connection has value. But those moments are mixed with periods of disregard that quietly weaken your confidence and blur your sense of self-worth. From a psychological point of view, people naturally respond to fairness and consistency. When that balance is broken, it creates internal tension. You're pulled between the good moments and the negative ones. And slowly you may start excusing the behavior. You might tell yourself it's just their mood, or that the situation caused it, or even that you did something wrong. That's where this pattern becomes a trap. Because instead of recognizing the inconsistency as a problem, you begin to internalize it. You start adjusting yourself to maintain the good version of them, even if it means tolerating the bad. The way to handle selective respect isn't through confrontation or long conversations. It's not about asking them to be consistent or trying to explain how you feel in detail. The solution is in your behavior. You simply match your level of engagement to what you consistently receive. If someone only shows up with respect when it benefits them, you stop offering full access all the time. You reduce your availability, your effort, and your emotional investment to match the reality of their behavior, not the occasional moments of kindness. This isn't about playing games or punishing them. It's about alignment. When your actions reflect the truth of the situation instead of the hope of what it could be, the dynamic becomes clear. If the person values the connection, they will notice the shift and adjust. If they don't, their inconsistency will become more obvious, and you'll have the clarity you need to decide how much space they should have in your life. In the end, respect is not something you chase or ask for. It's something you reinforce through what you allow and what you no longer accept. When your standards are consistent, your behavior becomes a signal, and that signal teaches people exactly how to treat you. Your response to this kind of behavior comes down to alignment. You start matching your level of attention, effort, and availability to how you are actually being treated. When someone becomes dismissive or shows a lack of respect, you naturally pull back. You don't chase, you don't overextend, and you don't keep giving the same level of access. And when they show up with genuine respect, you engage, but in a balanced way, without giving more than what's being returned. This approach sends a clear message without needing to say much. It shows that your time, your energy, and your presence are not automatically available to everyone. They are earned through consistent behavior. Another important part of this is awareness. You have to clearly see the pattern for what it is. Whether you reflect on it mentally or even take note of it, recognizing the inconsistency keeps you grounded. It stops you from normalizing behavior that slowly lowers your value. Without that awareness, it's easy to make excuses or overlook the pattern altogether. When you consistently respond based on reality instead of hope, the power of selective respect starts to fade. The other person can no longer rely on confusion or mixed signals to influence how you see them or the relationship. Everything becomes clearer, more direct, and more honest. The deeper lesson here is simple. Respect is not something that comes and goes depending on convenience. It's not temporary and it's not situational. Real respect is steady. It shows up the same way over time. Anything inconsistent begins to look less like respect and more like manipulation. The moment you stop tolerating selective respect, you take back control. You protect your self-respect, you gain clarity, and you remove the possibility for someone to treat you based on what suits them in the moment. You no longer allow your value to rise and fall depending on their needs. By holding that standard, you make it clear that your time, your presence, and what you bring to the table are not up for negotiation. And once that becomes clear, you create an environment where genuine, consistent respect is the only thing that fits. At the core of everything, respect is not something you ask for. It's something you set through what you allow and what you refuse to tolerate. Every ignored message, every public challenge, every disguised insult, every crossed boundary, and every moment of selective respect is a test of your standards. When you stay silent or overly accommodating, you unintentionally teach people that your value is flexible. But the moment you respond with calm consistency, clear boundaries, and aligned behavior, everything shifts. You don't need to argue, prove, or chase. You simply adjust, and that adjustment speaks louder than words. Real power comes from protecting your time, your energy, and your presence without guilt. When people see that access to you depends on how they treat you, respect becomes natural, not forced. And in that space, you don't just gain control over how others treat you, you redefine how you see yourself.